opening with a soft, warm tone. Welcome to Shadowlands Ghosts, a place where the lines between reality and the unknown are blurred, and the darkness whispers secrets in our ears. I'm your host, Raven Blackwood, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey into the heart of the shadows. As we sit here, surrounded by the familiar comforts of our daily lives, it's easy to forget that there are forces beyond our understanding, lurking just beyond the edge of our perception. But I'm here to remind you that the unknown is always closer than you think. Tonight, we'll be diving into a story that will take you to the edge of sanity and back. It's a tale of mystery, of loss, and of the unrelenting power of the past. Imagine a world where the airwaves are filled with the final moments of those who have vanished into thin air. A world where the past and present collide in a maelstrom of sound and fury. Our story is called The Last Broadcast, and it's a journey that will take you deep into the heart of madness. You'll follow the lead character, a person just like you, as they navigate the surreal landscape of a world where the past refuses to stay buried. And as you listen to their tale, you'll begin to realize that the line between reality and nightmare is thinner than you ever thought possible. So, if you're ready to join me on this journey into the shadows, subscribe to our channel and become a part of our community. Together, we'll explore the darkest corners of the human experience, and we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the shadows. In The Last Broadcast, you'll hear the story from the lead character's perspective, a person who's about to experience a night that will change their life forever. So, sit back, dim the lights, and prepare to enter a world where the past and present collide in a terrifying dance of sound and fury. Let's begin our journey into the Shadowlands. I've always been drawn to the night shift at WKCR, our local radio station. There's something about the quiet hours, when the world outside seems to slow down, that makes me feel at home. Maybe it's the way the darkness presses in against the windows, or the sound of the city's distant hum, a reminder that even in the stillness, there's always something moving just out of sight. As I settled into my chair, the familiar creak of the leather a comforting sound, I took a deep breath and began to scan the dials in front of me. My coworker, Emily, had already set up the evening's playlist, a mix of indie rock and old-school classics that would appeal to our late-night listeners. I smiled, thinking about the regulars who would be tuning in, the ones who relied on us to keep them company during the long, dark hours. We've been noticing something strange lately, though. Signals from old broadcasts, fragments of conversations, and laughter would bleed into our own transmissions. At first, we thought it was just interference, but as the occurrences grew more frequent, we began to suspect that something more unusual was at play. I'd always been fascinated by the idea of echoes, of the past lingering in the present. It was as if the airwaves themselves were a kind of memory, holding on to the sounds and voices of years gone by. And now, it seemed, we were tapping into that memory, playing back moments that were meant to be lost forever. As I adjusted the headphones, the hiss of static filling my ears, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was just a normal night at the radio station, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the cusp of something, that the darkness outside was pressing in, waiting to see what we would do next. I leaned in, my voice low and smooth, as I began to speak into the mic. Welcome to WKCR. I'm your host for the night. Stay tuned, and let's see where the night takes us. Little did I know, it would take me to a place I never could have imagined, a place where the past and present would collide in a terrifying dance of sound and fury. As I settled into the rhythm of the show, the music and my voice blending together in a soothing melody, I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. It was as if the shadows in the studio were shifting, growing longer and darker, like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch at my ankles. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand, but the feeling persisted. The phone lines were quiet, the only sound the occasional crackle of static as listeners dialed in to request songs or share their thoughts on the music. But then, just as I was starting to relax, I heard it, a faint whisper, a soft voice that seemed to be speaking directly into my ear. I spun around, but there was no one there. The studio was empty, the only sound the hum of the equipment and the music still playing in the background. I turned back to the mic, trying to shake off the feeling of unease, but the whispers seemed to be growing louder, more insistent. I leaned in, my voice low and husky, as I tried to communicate with the mysterious caller. "Hello, you're on the air. What's your request?" But there was only silence, the whisper seeming to fade away into the static. I was about to write it off as a prank call when I heard it again, a soft, raspy voice that seemed to be speaking a language I couldn't understand. It sent shivers down my spine, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Suddenly, the music stopped, and the studio was plunged into silence. I was alone, the only sound my own ragged breathing. And then, just as suddenly, the music started again, the notes jangling discordantly as if someone had taken over the controls. I spun around, but the studio was still empty. It was as if I was trapped in a nightmare, with no escape from the creeping horrors that lurked in the shadows. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. The phone lines started to ring, the calls pouring in as listeners responded to the strange occurrences on the air. But I knew it wasn't just the listeners who were responding. Something else was stirring, something that had been awakened by the strange signals and echoes that had been bleeding into our transmissions. As I tried to make sense of it all, the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent, until I was convinced that I was being pulled into a world beyond our own, a world where the past and present collided in a maelstrom of sound and fury. And I was just the conduit, the key to unlocking the horrors that lurked in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed. The music seemed to be building to a crescendo, the notes growing more discordant and jarring as the whispers grew louder. I felt myself being pulled into the heart of the storm, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went black. The music stopped, the whispers ceased, and I was plunged into silence. The studio was empty, the only sound my own ragged breathing. But as I sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, I realized that I wasn't alone. There was something else in the studio with me, something that had been awakened by the strange signals and echoes. And it was waiting for me, patiently, its presence a cold, dark shadow that seemed to be growing larger by the minute. I knew then that I had to get out of there, to escape the horrors that lurked in the shadows. But as I turned to make my way out of the studio, I realized that I was trapped. The doors were locked, the windows sealed, and I was at the mercy of whatever horrors lurked in the darkness. And then, the music started again, the notes jangling discordantly as the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I knew then that I was doomed, trapped in a world of sound and fury, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. As I sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened, I realized that I wasn't alone. There was something else in the studio with me, something that had been awakened by the strange signals and echoes. And it was waiting for me, patiently, its presence a cold, dark shadow that seemed to be growing larger by the minute. The whispers seemed to be growing louder, more insistent, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to stand up, to make my way out of the studio, but my legs felt like lead, refusing to move. I was trapped, and I knew it. The music started again, the notes jangling discordantly as the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I knew then that I was doomed, trapped in a world of sound and fury, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. And then I saw it. A figure, standing just beyond the edge of the light, its presence seeming to fill the entire room. It was tall and imposing, its features twisted and distorted in a way that seemed to defy human comprehension. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure began to move closer, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. As it drew closer, I could see its face, twisted and distorted in a way that seemed to be both human and yet not human at all. Its eyes were black as coal, and they seemed to be sucking all the light out of the room. The music was growing louder, more discordant, and the whispers were growing more insistent. I knew then that I was staring into the face of madness, a horror beyond human comprehension. And then the figure spoke. Its voice was like nothing I had ever heard before, a sound that seemed to be both ancient and yet eternal. It spoke in a language that I couldn't understand, but I knew that it was speaking directly to me. The words seemed to be crawling under my skin, burrowing deep into my mind. I felt my sanity begin to unravel, my grip on reality begin to slip. I knew then that I was doomed, trapped in a world of horror beyond my wildest imagination. The figure was the key to unlocking the horrors that lurked in the shadows, and I was just the conduit, the key to unlocking the door to madness. As the music reached a crescendo, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I felt myself being pulled into the heart of the storm, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. And then everything went black. The music stopped, the whispers ceased, and I was plunged into silence. But I knew that I was not alone. The figure was still there, waiting for me, patiently. I was trapped in a world of horror, with no escape from the madness that lurked within. And I knew that I would never be the same again. As I sat there, frozen in terror, the figure began to move closer, its presence filling the room with an unspeakable horror. The music was growing louder, more discordant, and the whispers were growing more insistent. I knew then that I was staring into the face of madness, a horror beyond human comprehension. The figure's eyes seemed to be sucking all the light out of the room, and I felt myself being pulled into their dark, abyssal depths. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure's face was twisted and distorted in a way that seemed to defy human comprehension. Its features seemed to be shifting, flowing like molten lava. I saw glimpses of human faces, distorted and twisted, but they were not human. They were something ancient, something eternal. The figure's voice was like nothing I had ever heard before. It was a sound that seemed to be both ancient and yet eternal. It spoke in a language that I couldn't understand, but I knew that it was speaking directly to me. The words seemed to be crawling under my skin, burrowing deep into my mind. I felt my sanity begin to unravel, my grip on reality begin to slip. I knew then that I was doomed, trapped in a world of horror beyond my wildest imagination. The figure was the key to unlocking the horrors that lurked in the shadows, and I was just the conduit, the key to unlocking the door to madness. As the music reached a crescendo, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. I felt myself being pulled into the heart of the storm, with no escape from the horrors that lurked within. The figure raised its hand, and I felt a cold, dark energy wash over me. I was consumed by a sense of dread, a feeling of utter hopelessness. I knew that I was staring into the face of the abyss, and the abyss was staring back at me. The figure's eyes seemed to be burning with an otherworldly intensity, and I felt myself being pulled into their depths. And then, everything went black. The music stopped, the whispers ceased, and I was plunged into silence. But I knew that I was not alone. The figure was still there, waiting for me, patiently. I was trapped in a world of horror, with no escape from the madness that lurked within. And I knew that I would never be the same again. But as I sat there, frozen in terror, I realized that I was not just a passive observer. I was a participant, a player in a twisted game of horror. And I knew that I had to confront the figure, to face my fears head on. I slowly rose to my feet, my legs trembling with fear. I took a step forward, and then another, my eyes fixed on the figure. It did not move, did not react. It simply stood there, waiting for me. I took another step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the figure's eyes on me, boring into my soul. I knew that I was taking a risk, that I was stepping into the unknown. But I had to do it. I had to confront the horror head-on. As I drew closer, the figure's face seemed to shift, to change. Its features flowed like molten lava, and I saw glimpses of human faces, distorted and twisted. I saw the faces of the damned, the faces of the mad. I reached out a hand, my heart pounding in my chest. I touched the figure's face and felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. The figure's eyes seemed to flash with an otherworldly intensity, and I felt myself being pulled into their depths. And then everything went white. The world around me dissolved, and I was left standing in a void of pure, white light. I knew that I was staring into the face of the abyss, and the abyss was staring back at me. But I was not afraid. I was not consumed by fear. I was consumed by a sense of wonder, a sense of awe. I knew that I was staring into the face of the unknown, and the unknown was staring back at me. And in that moment, I knew that I was free. I was free from the horrors that lurked in the shadows, free from the madness that had consumed me. I was free to explore the unknown, to confront the horrors head-on. But as I stood there, bathed in the pure, white light, I knew that I was not alone. The figure was still there, waiting for me, patiently. And I knew that I would never be the same again. As I stood in the void of pure, white light, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The horrors that had haunted me for so long seemed to be receding, banished by the gentle glow of the abyss. I knew that I had confronted the unknown, and in doing so, I had found a strange sort of freedom. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of the figure out of the corner of my eye. It was standing just behind me, its eyes fixed on me with an unblinking gaze. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that I was not free at all. I was still trapped in the world of horror, still bound to the figure by some unseen force. I tried to take a step forward, but my legs felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The figure did not move, did not react. It simply stood there, waiting for me to make my next move. And then I heard the music again. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more discordant. The whispers began to echo through the void, a maddening susurrus that seemed to come from all directions at once. I felt my grip on reality begin to slip, my sanity begin to unravel. I knew then that I was doomed. I was trapped in a world of horror, forever bound to the figure and its twisted game of madness. The abyss was not a place of liberation, but a prison, a trap from which I would never escape. As the music reached a crescendo, I felt myself being pulled back into the heart of the storm. The figure raised its hand, and I felt a cold, dark energy wash over me. I was consumed by a sense of dread, a feeling of utter hopelessness. And then everything went black. But even in the darkness, I could feel the figure's presence. It was still there, waiting for me, patiently. I knew that I would never be free, that I would be trapped forever in this world of horror. The last thing I remembered was the sound of the music, growing fainter and fainter as I was pulled deeper and deeper into the abyss. And then there was nothing. But even now, I can feel the figure's eyes on me, boring into my soul. I know that I am not alone, that I will never be alone again. The horror is still out there, waiting for me, patiently. And I know that I will never be free. Epilogue, the eternal vigil. The darkness has long since receded, and I am left with only the faintest echoes of the abyss. Yet I know that I am not free. The figure still watches me, its presence a constant reminder that I am forever bound to the world of horror. I have tried to rebuild my life, to find some semblance of normalcy in the wake of the abyss. But it's all just a facade. I know that I am living on borrowed time, that the figure can return at any moment, its cold, dark energy washing over me like a shroud. I often find myself standing at the edge of my bed, staring into the darkness, waiting for the figure to emerge from the shadows. I know that it's only a matter of time before it returns, before the music starts again and the whispers grow loud in my mind. And yet, I am drawn to the abyss. I am drawn to the figure, to the sense of liberation that I felt in its presence. I know that it's a lie, that the abyss is a prison and not a freedom. But I am powerless to resist its pull. I am trapped in a cycle of horror, forever bound to the figure and its twisted game of madness. I know that I will never be free, that I will always be watching, waiting for the figure to return. And so, I stand vigil, waiting for the inevitable. I know that the figure will return, that the music will start again, and the whispers will grow loud in my mind. I am prepared for it, as prepared as I can be. But even as I stand here, waiting for the horror to return, I know that I am not alone. The figure is with me, always, its eyes boring into my soul. And I know that I will never be free. The last thing I remember is the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears like a drum. It's the only sound that I can hear, the only sound that I will ever hear again. For in the end, it's not the music or the whispers that will consume me, but my own fear. And so, I wait, standing at the edge of the abyss, staring into the darkness, waiting for the figure to return. For I know that it will, and when it does, I will be ready. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of horror. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of The Eternal Vigil, and that it's left you with a lasting sense of unease and dread. As I stand here, waiting for the figure to return, I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for watching. Your support means the world to me, and I'm honored that you've chosen to spend your time with me in this world of darkness and terror. I know that it's not always easy to face the horrors that lurk in the shadows, but I hope that you've found some sense of catharsis, or even just a thrilling distraction from the mundane routines of everyday life. As we close this episode, I want to invite you to join me on future journeys into the unknown. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel, where you'll find a constant stream of new and terrifying content, each episode more chilling than the last. By subscribing, you'll not only be supporting the creation of more horror content, but you'll also be joining a community of like-minded individuals who share your passion for the darker side of life. So don't wait any longer. Click that subscribe button now and join me on this eternal vigil. Together, let's face the horrors that lurk in the shadows and explore the darkest recesses of the human experience. And if you're feeling generous, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the latest episodes and behind-the-scenes insights into the world of horror. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. But be warned, the figure is always watching, and it's only a matter of time before it returns.